Hello, welcome back to the channel. As promised, I'm going to go through the different therapeutic approaches and actually what the problem is with some of them, and just kind of weigh them up and explain them, because a lot of people that want to do therapy don't realize that there's lots of different forms of psychotherapy slash counseling. There's lots of different forms. There is kind of three main umbrellas, but I'm going to bring in a fourth as well, because a lot of people don't, especially in the West, we don't consider the mind and body to be connected, which is actually a massive, massive problem. They are connected, and many therapists in the past have proven that. And yeah, let's just go through this. I thought I'd start actually by just talking a little bit about Freud, because Sigmund Freud is known as the father of psychoanalysis. I would not be doing my job today if it wasn't for Freud. So we do owe him a lot. And some of his ideas, yes, they're probably a bit outdated now. And therapy in itself has moved on a lot since Freud's day. So, but we do owe him a lot. And I think that some of his theories still absolutely do stand. And when you read his work, you have to think that this was the start of a movement, really. Like, he was a very, very important figure in that way. So without him, we wouldn't have therapy like we do today. And I'll talk about the ways that it's changed since him, because you got to, I mean, look there, he was born in 1856, so it's a long time ago. The 6th of May. He died the 23rd of September, 1939, aged 83. His main field was psychoanalysis. Some of the theories within that, some of you might be familiar with, but some of these are really good. The id, the ego, and the superego, the Oedipus complex, psychological repression, psychosexual sexual development. Some of those are still used today, and actually some of them still have power. A lot of people question a lot of his stuff, and there's good and bad within Freud, is what I'm going to say. People have come along since him and perfected his work. That's the way I look at it. I also feel that his daughter Anna really took on his work, and kind of she did put a lot of thought into sort of making it better, I think, and I think she perfected a lot of his work. But yeah, that's kind of him and the history of where therapy comes from, really. A lot of his techniques were to do with free association, dreams, and defense mechanisms. And actually, what that's an actual picture of his couch, because that's how it used to be done. People would come in, he'd have the client lay on a couch, he would sit behind them in that green chair there, and with a sort of notes, and he would say to them, free associate. So don't suppress anything that comes out, even if it's gobbledygook or random thoughts, whatever it is, he would write it down. It's a really, really cool technique. I actually do that with journaling sometimes. So just let the mind wander, and what he's trying to do is bring the subconscious to the conscious, and then they would talk about it, and he would analyze it. That's not done as much today. It is much more like the client would come away with the findings. I try not to analyze anything for a client. I try to walk them through things, but ultimately they are the expert. Dreams is a big part of psychoanalysis. I still find dreams completely fascinating, and I have a couple of different ways that I work with dreams, but dreams were heavily important in the Freudian techniques. And defense mechanisms. So when you get defensive about things, when you try and move away from things and hide things and things like that, he would explore that with people and go, what's going on there? Like, what's the feelings? Da, da, da. So a lot of it still does have a lot of weight, to be fair, but it's come a long way since. These are kind of like the three main umbrellas that you hear today. So you've got the psychodynamic, the humanistic, and the behavioral. And they're kind of like the main. Most people will not even be aware of psychodynamic and humanistic, because they've been, as I said before, they've been pushed down the CBT route, which is behavioral. It to me, yeah, I'm not going to go on about that, but I will just break these down a little bit so you can kind of get an understanding of how they differentiate, and how, and there are similarities in some, but they're three very different ways of doing stuff. So the psychodynamic kind of is a little bit Freudian still. It's to do with the unconscious processes. In fact, all therapy really at its core, I think it was Jung that said it, making the unconscious conscious. That is so, so, so important in any of these. And it's something I try to do with my clients. It's what's going on underneath the id, the ego, and the superego. I'm not going to break them down. Perhaps I will in another video if that's what people are interested in. But childhood experiences, that's something, again, that I hold on to very, very dearly, because who we are as children and our experiences as children do shape who we are as adults. There's no doubt about that in my mind at all. Repression. So what are you repressing? Because obviously what you repress can, if we go into the mind body, can actually become illness, physical symptoms. Psychosexual stages, ego defenses, and it's often but not always focused on the past. So again, going into that kind of how we were exploring childhood, exploring our relationship with our parents, how that's kind of, shaped us into who we are today. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Obviously I could go really deep on that because I actually love psychodynamic theory a lot. What I will say here though, and I haven't pointed out perhaps in this slide and perhaps should have, these are sometimes delivered very differently. So a pure psychodynamic therapist will act like a sound off board. They won't be very human to human in your relationship, and they'll just sit there, maybe not like that, but they'll be very, very, very cold. It sometimes comes across as cold. And I've known people that have gone to psychodynamic therapy and actually said that when they come to me, my core is humanistic and I'm very much trying to be myself with the core conditions that I spoke about last time. And they'll be like, this is so different because I'm not trying to be a sound off board. I'm trying to be a human, human to human contact. So that's the psychodynamic. Humanistic, you've got client or person centered. I trained mostly in person centered therapy, which comes from Rogers. Gestalt is very interesting as well. I'm not going to break all these down, but you've also got the existential. Now, existential therapy, I think, is fascinating. I actually think it's not done enough, and I think that it explains a lot. And it's the search for meaning. Man's Search for Meaning. That's a great book, by the way, by Viktor Frankl. I would highly recommend everyone read that. It's phenomenal. So that, although it looks like there's less there, those are so deep. So that's humanistic. My core is person centered, but I draw on psychodynamic, very little behavioral stuff because I don't like it. And then we've got, under the behavioral, you've got the CBT, DBT, very similar, kind of different. They're looking at thoughts, processes, classical conditioning. This is also where exposure therapy comes from, which is frowned upon today. The interesting thing is when I come to talk about EFT later, emotional freedom techniques, is that it actually has a little bit of exposure to it, but it's done in such a gentle way and such a different way that it actually doesn't cause harm. But exposure therapy could cause harm if it's done incorrectly. It's like if you had this was done, I think, back in the past, was if, say, for instance, you had a phobia of spiders, a way that they'd look at it is go, right, put you in a room full of spiders, because eventually you can't be scared of spiders anymore because the brain can only hold anxiety for so long. Anyway, I won't go too deeply into it, but yeah, kind of frowned upon. You can see why. Aversion therapy, flooding, that's what I'm actually talking about there, flooding. Systematic desensitization. So they're very different. The trouble I find with behavioral is that a human being in its consciousness is made up of three things: thoughts, emotions, and actions. And actually, thoughts is just one part. If you can look at emotions and actions on a much deeper level, I actually think that I've said before, emotions are deeper anyway, because the emotion, when you're feeling very, very overwhelmed, psychologically, you might know that you shouldn't be feeling overwhelmed, but you can't help feeling it. So therefore, the feeling is deeper. But anyway, I digress. These are the lesser known therapies that I'm going to throw in as well, because no one hardly ever, it's becoming a bit more known now, but the body based therapy, like Willem Reich, he's a fascinating figure. I might do a whole presentation on him because he's so interesting. He started to link the body to thoughts, so and he came up with different forms of body work. Then another one of my heroes called Alexander Lowen took his work and then adapted it and made his own theory called bioenergetics, which again is fantastic. Then you've got breath work, EMDR, vagus nerve exercises, somatic experiencing. These are all body-based. Rolfing, Feldenkrais, and primal screen therapy. They all kind of come under body-based. Then you've got where it goes even deeper now. And I'm not going to bore you with quantum physics and quantum science, but it's an area that I'm fascinated with, and it kind of explains why energy psychology works. So EFT, although you're tapping on your body, it's actually based in traditional Chinese medicine, so it would fall under energy psychology. So it did come from TFT, which is thought field therapy, but again, I'm not going to, I will expand on them later. But and then you've got the Mace energy method, and no one's talking about that today, and that's another form of energy psychology. So we'd go into deeper levels of our consciousness. I wanted to throw this in because, as I said before, human beings in our consciousness are made up of mind, body, and spirit. I'm not going into religion here. I'm just going into quantum mechanics. So you've got the mind, which is based in psychology, the body, which is your physiology, and your spirit, which is your energy. The main problem with modern day counselling and psychotherapy is that for years it has left out the spiritual component or energy body. And that's the problem. And I've put there, going back to that slide, all of these methods only address the mind. And that's why now, with new knowledge, we can actually bridge that gap. We can actually help people on a much, much deeper level. And in the West, sadly, we've been disconnected from that. I think if you look at the East and things like Chinese medicine, they've understood for years that, there's meridians in the body, and that actually putting needles into certain points or tapping on certain points, it's the same thing, actually has a physiological response and actually can help. So yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in there for people that don't know. So I don't want people to go down the CBT route and think that's all there is to offer, because there's so much more. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that. See you in the next one.